Welcome to Harvesting Maine, a podcast brought to you by Real Maine, a promotional program of the Maine Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry. This is episode 8, and we have a great group of farmers calling in from all parts of Maine. We're looking forward to hearing about their businesses and what's going on in spring in Maine and how they put their multi generational efforts into providing fresh food for Maine consumers and beyond. Welcome, Erin. Let's start with you. Erin, could you tell us a little bit about your farm and what you do and where you're located?
I guess our farm's a rustic beef company. We're up in New Canada, Maine. We mostly do Black Angus cattle, selling direct to consumer, and we're adding a little bit more and more with the veggies and flowers and such, but mostly focused on the beef.
Excellent. And so, just so our listeners who don't know much about Maine and its geography, how far are you from um, Boston, Portland, or the Canadian border?
I can see Canada from my grandparents' house, so I guess we're pretty close there. Um, I guess we don't get out a lot, but we're probably 5 hours or so from Portland, about a little over 3 hours from Bangor.
Perfect. All right. So that helps us all explain and see just how big of a state Maine is and all the great agricultural products that y'all are growing. Um, Similar up there in the county in Aroostook, we're going to go over to Joe. Um, Joe, tell us about your farm and what you do and where you're coming in from today.
Well, we get a few things going on the farm here. We plant potatoes on a much lower scale than we used to. We also have cattle, Black Angus, mixed with a little bit of Herefords. Uh, we grow and mill buckwheat flour for a ploy mix, which has really worked out well for us. We have a good side roadside stand or farm store located on the farm that's been going on for the past 7 8 years. So it's keeping us busy. We got a fair amount going on. As far as if you want to talk geography again, we're my farm is located just pretty much abutting Aaron's farm, but we're just a little north.
Perfect. Yeah. It's always nice to have neighbors tuning in. It's a great way to showcase Maine farms. All right. Let's hear from Annie Watson.
Hi there, Annie Watson. I am co-owner of Sheepscot Valley Farm in Whitefield, Maine. My husband and I own the farm, and we purchased it in 2013 from a retiring farmer. We are a certified organic dairy farm. We milk about 65 cows. We ship to the co-op that owns the Organic Valley brand. And we farm with our 4 small children, so they kind of just are along for the ride, technically, at this point. 7, 5, and 1.5, all little boys. So our life is very busy. But in addition to the farming, I also wear several hats in the dairy industry in the state. I serve on the boards of the Maine Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association, known as MOFGA, the Maine Dairy Industry Association, the Northeast Organic Family Farm Partnership, and the Maine Organic Milk Producers. Additionally, I am working to bring a line of branded organic milk from Maine to market, and that has been taking up a lot of my extra time, so to speak, if there is such a thing. So thank you for having me, and I'm very happy to be here with fellow farmers and with you, Anne.
Yeah, great. Well, we're so happy that you're all here. Annie, my first question is for you because you talked about kind of these extra time and hats that you're wearing. Tell me a little bit about kind of what that extra like hat that you're wearing does and speak to how that helps consumers understand more about milk because dairying in Maine is a little bit different than you don't just go to a market necessarily. You can, but you talked about the co-op, so help us understand that a little more.
Sure. Well, our farm ships to are members of a co-op, the crop co-op, the Coulee Region of Organic Producer Pools. It's based in Wisconsin. We have, I believe, 1,800 members total, all across the country. So at this point, Organic Valley's been in the news because they're picking up some of the farms that Horizon dropped in the past, I think 6 months or so. It's been last August they dropped them. And so we're very proud to be a farmer-owned cooperative because we can make decisions that are based at the farm level. And so I appreciate being a member of a co-op because it allows a certain level of understanding that the sort of corporate level has to explain to the membership because we are membership owned and based. And so it feels much more like a community. But for Maine in general, we have a very small dairy community. I believe we have 176 farms total. Approximately 50 of those are organic. So we have as organic farmers, we have a pretty, what am I trying to say? We're a pretty big piece of the pie in terms of, I guess, typical farm, conventional to organic ratios. So I found that our state industry groups, as well as our Department of Agriculture, when they talk about dairy, they don't just talk about conventional or organic. They talk about it as an industry because all our farms are so important. And I feel very fortunate to farm in Maine because of the understanding and the support that we have from so many levels, be it different stakeholder groups or different service providers. And as I'm sure the other farmers on the call will agree, having all of our farms work together is as important as anything. Because if you lose a farm, you're not just losing a farm, you're losing a community hub, you're losing so much more access to other service providers, tractor dealers, seed dealers. We're all so interconnected. So I found that being an advocate for dairy, especially organic dairy, at these various levels these hats I wear, so to speak, has been helpful for myself, for my own understanding of how our state works, and also I like to think that I've been helpful to consumers as well as other industry folks in sort of understanding what organic means and what we're trying to do that might be a little bit different. So.
Yeah, and I think you touched on the point that was pretty important, and Joe and I were discussing this a little bit earlier, but and I'd like your thoughts on this too, Joe. But like the community connection, right? So Joe and Aaron, you both are up there in the northernmost part of Maine, where there's a lot of farming happening, and it's not necessarily on take it to the market scale, but it's producing a lot, and you definitely rely on each other. Joe, could you speak more to kind of the neighborliness or the cooperation that's required to kind of keep farming a forefront of people's minds in your community?
Well, definitely, the farming aspect is not as not the community tends to go by their business and not really know how they're getting anything in the stores. So a lot of them don't really know how these products are made, whether it's milk or peas or beef or potatoes. So years ago, it wasn't like that because there was probably kind of hard to put that in relation, but many more farms in the area as far as potatoes go. Beef has not been strong in the area in the past. Only the past 20 years or so, beef, as far as the production of freezer beef or commercial going to the market, has come online. But definitely, the farmers try to incorporate what they're doing with the public, with field days, with farm days, with petting zoos that we have in our little stand here, or in the fall, pumpkin hunts. So we just try to keep that in the forefront to get these young kids and the public to really know what's going on. Not that you want them to know what you're doing personally, but just in general how things come about. Meaning food and yeah, food and types of food.
How it gets to your table or what you might
Exactly.
find. Yeah. And your family had has done a couple different things to adapt to kind of integrate that. Has that kind of been part of the bigger plan, or is there a
Well,
specific plan to it?
in farming, you kind of go with the flow. You know, you change with the markets. You have to, because if you don't, you won't be around long. Uh, when I was younger, we were growing just potatoes and 1 year rotation grain, which is the way it was up here. You were either a 100-acre farm or a 500-acre farm. Back in 80, maybe 84, we stumbled on this buckwheat flour business. A little bit of experimenting here and there. The ploys, we've grown up on ploys all our life. It's a food that our ancestors grew up on. It's an ancestral food, like a bread. So anyway, we started marketing that, and this is where we are. Last year, I had 400 acres of buckwheat, uh, which is a good thing for us.
Yeah.
So, like I say, you have to adapt with what the market wants. Potatoes was a very hard market way back when. It's still a hard market. So anyway, we're still plugging away.
Yeah, that's great with multiple generations, and same over in your neck of the woods, Aaron. You have you mentioned some adaptations that you're putting into place. Tell us a little bit more about what's going on in your family's farm.
Um, that's probably me just finding a passion for growing vegetables and flowers and stuff like that, and just being able to offer it to the customers that we already serve. Because despite it being like really heavy in agriculture up here, the diversity really struggles. So there's lots and lots of potatoes, but there's not really a lot of much else. So we've got some beef people, we've got some pork people, some chicken people, some veggies, but I'd say as a rule, there's not enough of any of us to hit demand of any of it. And we could actually use a dairy up here too, but and so that's where we've run into some struggles on the beef side with finding enough ground to hay and stuff like that, that we're kind of just like pulling the reins in a little bit to downsize to where we're not buying a lot of hay and feed and stuff like that, because with the droughts and just the climate of everything, the costs are getting out of hand. And so just being more self-sufficient there, and then just allowing us to more time to branch out into these other things that our customers are asking us for. They want chicken and eggs and this and that, and where we're not going down that route yet, it's definitely something that just from a sustainability and diversity standpoint, I would like to incorporate eventually. But I'm not interested in doing the poultry butchering myself again. I did it to know that I could do it, but I'm okay in my knowledge of what I can and can't do, that that's not something that I'm going to do a lot of. And so just, I don't know, branching out in lots of different things just to hit.
Yeah. Good skills for the farmer too, right? Just being comfortable in knowing what you can do, want to do, or like managing those resources too. And I think you've also done some great work with photography too. I should mention to our listeners that Aaron supplied one of the cover photos for Real Maine's spring publication in 2022. So that was very beautiful. You had some sweet peas welcoming springtime. Hopefully that'll happen again soon. But what's the temperature like there today? It's end of April. How's the weather and the temperature for you today, Aaron?
Today wasn't my favorite day. We've had some warm-ups lately, but today was back to low 30s, kind of trying to sleet/snow some more. And we're getting there. It's almost spring. A lot of the snow's melting off. We're seeing the pastures at least finding some ground now. So not so much in the trees and fence lines, but we're getting there.
Yeah. So will that dictate kind of the next steps on your, I guess, farming to-do list of when the ground is ready and the snow is melted? What happens after that?
Yeah. So pretty much about any time, once the cattle start to think that there's some green grass somewhere, they're going to start testing fences. And Joe was kind enough to help us this last summer when we had some heifers decide to go for a bit of a joyride. But yeah, so cattle are going to start getting squirrely pretty quick because you can feed them all the hay they want, but if they smell and see some green grass, they're history. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for doing that, Joe. It's good to know. They say good fences make good neighbors, right? And having the good cow sense is probably even better, right?
Well,
What's next on your tasks, Joe? Are you going to be? I think you mentioned you might have had a baby calf born today. Is that?
yeah, I found it today. I was dropping some bedding in one of the pens, and I says, all the calves in here should be tagged, and this one didn't have a tag. So it must have come yesterday or late last night or early this morning. But anyway, we'll take care of it when we tomorrow morning or so, something like that.
Keep an eye on things.
Yeah.
And when do the cows kind of like what are the cows up to this spring? Are yours also sniffing the air for signs of spring?
Oh, they can't wait to get out, definitely. I just finished cleaning them because in the wintertime, they can get pretty packed, solid. Everything is froze. So as soon as that melts, we got to try to take it out as soon as we can.
Yeah, make it become a compost or
That's
fertilizer.
taken a fair amount of time. We're starting to get machinery ready for the spring, because when the ground is ready, we got to start making dust.
What
So,
kind of work does it take for the machinery? So you've got quite a bit because you're planting, right? You're planting seeds into the ground. Walk us through that because it's a bit of a unique, particularly with the buckwheat, right? It's not like you're planting or corn, right? It can be a little bit different than managing other.
it's similar to planting a regular small grain like oats or barley or wheat. It's basically the same thing. You got to get your drills ready and service all the tractors so you don't get out there and things start to break down. They do anyway, but you try to minimize that. Um, Other than that, you just got to find the right people, and when the time is right, go to
Let,
town.
let it rip. Yeah. Makes sense. Annie, how about yeah, your family and all the activities that you're up to in springtime on the dairy?
Sure. Well, we've had sort of a funny spring because we just retrofitted our tie stall or comfort stall is what we're supposed to be calling them now. Milking barn, we retrofitted into a parlor. And that actually went online last week, or almost it'll be 2 weeks on Thursday. So that has been a huge adjustment for our farm. Um, Mostly just learning a new system. It took the cows quite a while to sort of get there, get a grip, I should say. But it will vastly improve our efficiency in our milking system. And so it was a much needed project. But now that that has completed, and we also built a new heifer barn this past winter too. So we've all been chomping at the bit to kind of get back to farming because it's been a lot of construction. And so this time of year, as soon as the ground allows, we'll get out and start spreading manure. Our systems we have two bedded pack barns, one for the milking cows that we've had for about 4 years now, and the new heifer barn which is also a bedded pack for our heifers. That's brand new as of this year. So that is its own manure source. It ends up as compost. We have to make sure it all gets cleaned out and then turned several times so that it becomes like a dry manure that we can spread. We also have a liquid manure pit. I know I never thought in a million years I would be talking all about poop, but it's an integral part of our system, especially since we're organic. So we utilize as much as we can. So we have liquid to spread as well. So that is the name of the game for the spring. I would say the second week in May, hopefully, we will let the cows out and we intensive rotationally graze our herd, which means they're in pastures for about 12 hours only, and then we move them. And we found that's an efficient way to work our milking herd. We pasture our heifers off our farm on various landowners' properties. So it's all about fencing. Spring is manure and fencing and fencing and fencing and fencing, because once those cows go out, they're into the rotation. So you better have all your pastures ready, if not like many ahead. And we have, I believe, 27 different pastures. So it's quite a bit of fencing. But that's something that we can all get in on, essentially. Like our whole family likes to have little parts of that. The kids, I think, just like riding the four-wheeler, but it does allow for a little bit more family involvement. So, and then once, the end of May hits, we start haying. We try to get our haying in as quick as possible, that first cut right off the ground. And then it just continues, and hopefully weather is good for us. Hopefully we get what we need, because it's been a rough couple of years with up and down and really nothing consistent. And I kind of joke with my husband that the new normal is unknown. So you just have to kind of prepare for anything. So we've tried to gear our systems in a way that we can be flexible and get things done as quickly as possible. But I fully agree. Once those cows start smelling green grass, they are like, I don't even know how to describe them. They're just chomping at the bit, literally, to get out and start grazing. And it's a really fun day when we let the cows out, because they all just run out in the pasture and dance and kick, and it's one of the really fun parts of our job is getting to see that. So
yeah. And do you also do you see that some have maybe certain I don't want to say leadership capabilities, but in the herds, are there some who are helping kind of navigate through the rotational grazing and?
Oh, for sure. There are some that just take the lead, and that they're the leaders in the herd, essentially. The smart ones, I always say, just walk out to a good spot and then start eating. It's the young ones that kind of kick around and dance, and they'll run back up to the barn and out to the field again. And so it's quite entertaining. The smart old girls are just like face down in the grass. But then as the season moves on, and as we're walking up to different pastures, there are absolutely different members of the herd that sort of take the lead and push the little ones around, the younger ones around, and tell them what's what, because of course they have to come back to the barn to get milk twice a day. So that's why rotationally grazing them actually makes a lot of sense for us, because once they come into the barn to milk, we can reset where they are. So it's a system that we found works. And our cows actually cross the road, which is Townhouse Road in Whitefield, which is a pretty busy road. And so we joke that it's the biggest traffic jam in Whitefield is when the cows are crossing. But people love to stop and see them, and it's a good way to sort of remind people that we're there. Because as I think Joe was saying, it's challenging that so many people don't understand where their food comes from. And so we've sort of adopted this idea that, like, yes, we would love, we don't necessarily have this farm set up to be like an agritourism spot at this point. We are just up the road from the Sheepscott General Store and Farm, which is a vegetable farm. And so we have a lot of traffic on our road. And so we hope that people will recognize that we're there, and that we provide something that, not everybody's been on a dairy farm. I hadn't, certainly, before I met my husband, a long time ago, which feels like, but I think it's really important that we recognize all of the work that the farmers in our communities do, and how they really work together, and how when you lose a farm in a community, it really has impacts that ripple for quite a ways, and it's not just your insular little rural community that feel the effects, and that's something that is sort of dear to my heart, and like it's becoming my life's work, apparently, is to really promote our local products and to show what really goes into these products and into our farming work in the state.
Yeah, that's great. And I think all of you have you've talked about ways that you're selling those products. So I would like to ask each of you, Annie, I'll start with you. Like, if somebody wants to buy milk from Maine or milk from your farm, and then they're at the supermarket, what's a good way for them to know that?
Well, currently, if you buy the Organic Valley brand, any of the products, which range from fluid milk to butter and sour cream, that's supporting our cooperative, and it's supporting many farms in Maine, organic dairy farms in Maine. Additionally, at this point, all of the organic all of the Organic Valley milk in Maine is going directly to the Stonyfield plant in Londonderry, New Hampshire. And so all the Stonyfield products, all the Stonyfield yogurt products, are made with Maine milk, essentially. So you can feel pretty good supporting Organic Valley, our farmer-owned cooperative, or the Stonyfield brand, which are really big brands for sure. But I think it's good for people to understand that while they might be big and seem very corporate, they are very committed to our small organic dairy farms in the state. And then hopefully at some point you'll be able to see the Maine Organic Milk Company brand on your store shelves and know that that is organic milk from Maine. So there are many ways.
Because not all farms can have a brand.
Right.
In addition to doing I think maybe all three of you can calculate this, but we'll call it at least an 80-hour work week. But we can get into that for sure. Erin, tell me a little bit more about how folks can find your farm products.
So we got a little bit lucky that just before COVID happened, I had transitioned to more an online storefront just to make access a little bit easier. And then as soon as COVID started, we leaned really heavily into that. We didn't have the store open, which we have in Fort Kent that first COVID year. And so we used it as a pickup point so that we could do contactless ordering and stuff like that. And so our online store is kind of the most user-friendly, easiest access. We also have the store in Fort Kent, and then I'm usually in the Presque Isle Farmers Market every Saturday during that season as well. And then Bangor, we do a pickup there. Our butcher is downstate in Guilford, and so I coordinate like making a Bangor on up run while I'm already down there. And so we have some people down that way that buy our products as well.
So a little bit of kind of a hybrid style. You're doing almost like if this were 100 years ago, it'd be like a catalog, like you don't have to worry about ordering the catalog, but you've got it all kind of mechanized. And does it help you with some efficiencies and managing everything from your long work week, or anything that you would give a tip for a consumer if they want to support you that way for timelines? Should they call you like, hey, you're heading to Guilford, stop by on the way back, or do they need to give you a couple weeks notice for things like that?
Yeah, that's kind of like where the website has definitely saved me a lot of hours. The platform was created by a farmer, and so it's very user friendly for farmers. They know what we're going through in this direct to consumer market, and just the efficiencies there, especially once COVID happened. There would be no way that I could have handled the demand and the phone calls and the emails if it wasn't for the website. And so we do a little bit of shipping too. And so that was helpful, just that when people were searching for it, we popped up here and there.
Yeah, and a familiar name always helps too. Joe, now your family has a pretty familiar name if people are walking through supermarkets across Maine. Tell us a little bit more about how people can find some of your family's products.
Well, as far as the beef goes, that's more word of mouth. I get a phone call, side of beef, going here, going there, quarter, whole beef, and then I just coordinate the slaughter time and the pickup time. That's kind of the way it's been probably for hundreds of years. I never jumped to anything like what Erin is doing. But as far as our buckwheat flour is concerned and our ploy mix, that we got a pretty intense website that worked well for us, and we're redoing it more for mail order purposes. It was pretty time consuming as far as like downloading an order, figuring out the shipping, making phone calls because the card wasn't quite right, and back and forth. So hopefully with the new website, that will take care of itself. Like if you go on Amazon, you don't have to make a phone call to the person, or you don't get a phone call from it, Mr. Amazon, saying your PIN number was wrong.
Yeah.
So hopefully that will alleviate a lot of the problems that we have right now. Other than that, it's a very good website, and it works well. And we are also the Hannafords do well for us. Associated buyers, associated grocers, the grocery stores. There's a few people that are a few bakeries that are picking up the buckwheat flour because it is gluten free, and there's a lot of gluten free people out there, and that's like I say, that's been doing real well since the pandemic, and nobody could get flour way back. When the pandemic first started, we had a little jump there, and now with what's going on between these two countries, Russia and Ukraine, who knows what's going to happen with the flour market?
Yeah, that's a good point. Tell us a little bit more about like the difference between types of grains, right? So that you've got a product that has really been around for a long time, and it also has some culturally or heritage significance to lots of Maine and communities across northern New England. So tell us a little bit more about this particular type of product, because you're pretty popular when it comes to the buckwheat flour.
Well, I don't know about that. Like I said, we we don't go far from our little world here, so I don't know exactly how popular it is, but it definitely has gotten out there. Uh, the buckwheat flour there's not many grains out there that are gluten free. So we had our flour analyzed by the Celiac Support Association. I think it's out in University of Wisconsin or somewhere's out there. That's more my wife's department, but that definitely has been a plus for our business. Buckwheat flour used to be 20% of our sales before we knew what gluten was, and it definitely has picked up to over 50% in the past 10 years or so. It's a certified gluten-free product. The mill, that there's no potential of cross-contamination. So there had to be some steps had to be taken to achieve this level. So we can guarantee a person who has a young child who can't say the word gluten to be able to be comfortable in having this flour. So we have to be on our game as far as that's concerned.
Yeah. You do you're wearing a lot of hats with that too. Is there kind of walk us through? I mentioned again 80-hour work week if you're lucky, but how does your family manage the workload and the workflow from week to week, day to day, season to season?
Well, the slower season is definitely in the wintertime when there's no crops. Things don't grow in the wintertime. So that's where we can concentrate on milling. My son milled this afternoon. So we try to mill. He milled this afternoon, but we try to mill in the morning so we can get, work with the cattle and the crops in the afternoon. That type of deal. So that works out well for us. My wife handles a lot of the computers, the marketing, the shipping problems. Everybody has shipping problems. It gets the other end and it looks like a truck ran over it. But that's just the way it is now. As the marketing there, the potato crop is in the wintertime. I don't do much marketing. Talk to a buyer from Boston and they come and get it. I put it up and then we bring it there. So there's no on the phone all the time marketing the potatoes. As far as the marketing is concerned, it's more the flour, because we know that's where we should put most of our efforts. Because, like I say, gluten free, and I don't want to put aside our ploy mix. That's that's a good seller also. But the gluten free is the niche.
Yeah. Yeah. And you keep on saying the word ploy. So for our listeners who don't know what a ploy is, tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, it's a French Acadian flatbread that our ancestors grew up on. Every ethnic people have their type of bread, and the French Acadians ate ploys, and that's a mixture of white flour, buckwheat flour, baking powder, and a little bit of salt. So we have to buy in the white flour, baking powder, and salt, but we have full control over the buckwheat flour. We grow it, dry it, whatever we have to do to it, and mill it for the product, for our ploy mix. We mix that all together and package it, and all the consumer has to do is add water to make their flatbread, their ploys. And kids love them for breakfast. You can have them with dessert, with your chicken stews, beans, and you experiment with it and eat it any way you want it, as long as you eat it. But it's
What's
like a bread. Use it as a bread substitute.
yeah. What's your favorite way to enjoy them?
Well, just regular ploys, regular butter and chicken stew is good, but dip it in maple syrup. Uh, that's also good.
Sounds delicious. Which makes me, I always have to ask the farmers who are growing food products what their favorite recipes and tips are. So, Aaron, I'm going to ask you for yours too. What are some of your favorite ways to, I presume it'd be beef, but vegetables too. Give us some ways on preparing them and your favorites.
I guess there's probably a little bit of a misnomer there that I forget the show, if it was called The Ranch or whatever, where the guy was literally eating steaks every night, and it's just so far from reality. It doesn't make sense. But so we predominantly in our house will use ground beef roast and stew meat, with stew meat like far and away being my favorite. I'm not a cook, and so for me to have a cut that no matter what I do with it, I can't mess it up. And so just the low and slow, and it doesn't matter if you're doing a stew, or my favorite's a stroganoff. It comes out amazing just every single time. And so it's really hard to beat that super tender beef. So that's our go-to. My
And pretty
husband would
easy.
be the steak and potato guy, with our kids apparently following in his footsteps. You give them food and the meat is the first thing to disappear. And so definitely beef eaters in this house.
Good thing you have a beef farm. How about you, Annie? What are your favorite ways to eat dairy products or any types of Maine foods?
We are big cheese lovers in our house. I have yet to actually make any cheese other than, just an easy ricotta. But we drink our raw milk pretty daily, especially, 3 growing children. They are drinking a lot of milk, which is a good thing we have a dairy farm. But occasionally I do run out, and if the milk truck's been that morning, we're out of luck, which is always a challenge. But there are so many wonderful cheeses in Maine. We have so many wonderful cheesemakers, we really feel blessed. I have one on my road even, and it's just to see the creativity there is really amazing. And just the bounty that we have access to as Mainers, from our neighbors' farms, or from, our all the way, 300 miles away and still in Maine. I think we're very fortunate, because that Maine brand really means something coming from Maine. I think we all kind of trust that that we're making good decisions for our farms, for our land, for our animals. And so I try to utilize as many fresh ingredients as I can in my cooking. I do have, like I said, the 3 picky eaters at this point. But we eat a lot of ground beef, because we have, we cull some of our cows and put them in the freezer. And we have a farmer friend from down the road raise a pig for us. So, we have freezers full of meat, and that is a very fortunate thing that we do feel very fortunate to have access to. So I guess I cook all the time. I love to cook. but I don't really know if I have a true like recipe that I love to recommend. I should probably come up with something. I mean, macaroni and cheese is always a love of everyone's. The creamier, the better. But we roast chickens or do roast. I agree. Low and slow with the beef makes a big difference. Spare ribs and red wine sauce is delicious. Anything you can put in the oven and leave, I think, is always good in our hectic lives. So yeah, I don't know if I have one true thing, but that's a good question. I will think on that.
Right. We can always follow up with recipe tips later. Maybe I'll curate a few. I was speaking to some folks in one of our previous episodes, and they've got great suggestions. One of them, I think, was Aroostook County nachos. So I think it's a modern twist on the cookbooks that we've seen across our communities, whether it's 4-H or FFA or community places like churches or things like that. So I always love hearing how farmers are just doing simple things. So I think it's nice to keep it simple too, because we're all pretty busy, and you all are quite busy. So it's always nice to know that. I've got another question for you, Annie, relating to kind of managing the dairy and all the milk that you are keeping an eye on. What you had a couple words earlier, so parlor and milk truck may not be familiar to our average listeners. Tell us their role in the dairy farm.
Sure. So our milking parlor is the system that we use to milk the cows, and essentially what it is it's a pit that a person stands in, and it's a long sort of like canal, and all the milkers are above you, and the cows come in and they line up on one side. I'm sorry, I talk with my hands. I know it's hard when you're on Zoom, but they line up at 10 to a side, and we prep and milk one side, and then when those 10 cows are finished, we prep and milk the next 10. And those cows walk back out to either pasture or back to the barn or wherever they're headed for that time. All the milk goes through a milk pipeline and into our milk tank, which is in our milk room. And our milk gets picked up every other day. And usually around 8 a.m. in the morning, a milk truck backs up to our milk house and hooks up a hose and basically sucks all the milk into the truck. Before they do that, though, they take a few tests to check to make sure that there aren't any antibiotics used, as well as just some quality tests that they take that are then tested at a lab. And they check the temperature to make sure the milk has cooled to temperature before they pick it up. Temperature is a huge part of the equation. Temperature of the milk in your bulk tank, as well as temperature, how quickly the milk is cooled off when it comes out of the cow. Because cows' resting temperatures, I believe, about 102 degrees. It's quite warm. And so their milk is quite warm. And so it takes a lot of energy to cool that milk down. And so what we have is what's called a plate cooler. And it's a very complicated system that I really cannot explain completely how it works, but I do know that similar to a radiator, the warm milk runs along lines that also have cool water in them. And so they run by the cool water lines, and it is a process that helps to cool the milk before it enters into the bulk tank. And so we have to be sure that bulk tank is refrigerated and that it's working correctly every single day. That is the thing about dairy, is it's a commitment like no other, because cows have to get milk no matter what. And it's part of the system. And that milk truck, once it picks up the milk, and it isn't necessarily hauling only milk from one truck or from one farm, it's hauling milk from several farms. So they need a way to just differentiate if there was an issue with the milk, a quality issue, where that originated from. And so they can really do a lot of tracking, which is incredibly important for food safety purposes. And I think it's important that consumers understand that your milk is really cared for. And it's very carefully maintained to be sure that it is safe. And it's, when it gets to the plant, to be pasteurized, homogenized, and turned into whatever product it needs to be turned into, that the consumers and customers, people who are buying the bulk milk, understand that there's a lot of safety measures that have been taken. So it's a really big part of a much larger system of production that doesn't just start on the farm, but it's it's a lot. It takes a lot of people. It takes a village, so to speak.
Yeah, it's more like to your point earlier about the teamwork and
Yep.
collaboration. Like, tell me more a little bit about that quality measures. And I know all three of you are putting quality measures from start to finish. But on the dairy one, my specific question is about like, what does that data tell you as the farmer? Is it going to tell you, okay, I have consumers who are happy. They're all dairy. We know it's antibiotic free. So that's great. But for the farmer, what can you do with that information?
Sure. Well, our quality components can tell you a lot about what's going on with the system in general. If your water heater isn't getting hot enough during the washdown, you'll have an elevated bacteria count. And that's when you find out when you get your quality results, it's a snapshot of what's going on at the bulk tank. And these are obviously things that we can't see. So unless we have that data, we're not going to know that that's happening. But it allows us an opportunity to fix whatever is broken, or to adjust whatever needs adjusting, to turn our tank down, or to try to push the milk truck pickup a little bit later if the milk needs a little bit longer to cool down. It also will tell us what our somatic cell count is, and that is what our average what the white blood cells count is in our milk. And it can tell you if there are cows that aren't feeling good or if there are issues. And that's all incredibly important data as we put out a product. And so the more consistent we can be, the better for our farm, but also from our co-op standpoint, because they really value consistency and they value quality. And I know for a fact the co-op is always very surprised because we have very good quality results in Maine. And we get awarded for that, not only through our paychecks, but also with like little plaques that say, oh, gold award for this or that and the other. And I think I had a board member from Organic Valley come out from the Midwest, and they hand these out at our meetings. And he was just like, I can't believe how many quality awards you guys have. And it, makes us feel pretty good because we know we're doing a good job and we're really paying attention to all the minute details that go into our system. So
Yeah, and taking care of the cow too, right? Knowing whether or
exactly.
not she's feeling well in a way that you can't see with your eyes seems incredibly important for these assets on your farm,
For
right?
sure.
They're just as much of a partner, it sounds like.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. And they're top notch. I mean, I like to say that our barn had curtains before our bedroom did. And our milking parlor has radiant heat, but our house does not. So I like to joke that our cows are very well taken care of.
Yeah, I'm sure they appreciate that. Yeah, and the quality approaches. So question for you, Joe. Tell me about how you're measuring quality and paying attention to that, whether it's the livestock or the planting. How do you do that? I think even before we went live, you were telling about some of your quality control tips that you were using, which is just a hand tool. But you were talking about the core samples. That's probably one example that comes to my mind. Anything else that you're using to make sure the products are tip-top shape for the consumers or the plants or the animals?
I'm glad you remembered about that core sample because that happened about 3 hours ago and I totally forgot about it. But yeah, we always definitely we're not as critical as Annie. I think I just made my mind. I'm not going into dairy, but we with our buckwheat flour, I keep going to the buckwheat flour because that is where we want to be headed towards to increase that market. But the buckwheat flour, we're always tested. The state of Maine comes in, gives us their blessing. The kosher people come in, give us their blessing once a year because we are certified kosher. The buckwheat flour has got to be tested every 6 months or every year for this parts per million of gluten. You're allowed so many parts per million to still be certified gluten free. As far as the cows are concerned, well, there's no governing agency that comes in and inspects me. Way back when I was growing some animals for pine land, you had to qualify and keep standards as far as the being all natural, which is no antibiotics, no growth hormones, no animal byproducts, and there's a few other criteria there. And since I learned with them, with Pineland and their vet, that's what I have been doing to be able to sell an all natural product. Like I say, there's no growth hormones, antibiotics, and all that stuff. So as far as the potatoes go, well, we have governing agencies that come by, seed inspectors, pesticide inspectors that check our log books, check what we're doing to make sure that we're putting on the right stuff or not putting on the wrong stuff as far as being able to grow our product. Other than that, like I say, it's not as intense as Annie's, but we have our own little challenges.
Yeah. And keeping it organized is always part of it, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, that's all part of it.
Aaron, how about you and your farm focusing on quality control and how you know that you're able to, meet your consumer goals, but also care for the land and the crops and the animals?
I guess it's all pretty intertwined when you're direct to consumer. So the end user is really like who we're beholden to. So we, when we started, I mean, we came from kind of a conventional background of you feed corn and you feed just DDGs and everything like that. And up here, I just knew we had to be different. The customers are getting more and more educated. They don't want the GMOs. They want to know you're treating your animals well and everything like that. And that's not to say that commodity guys don't treat their animals well, as much as we can't feed the same things that some of these other guys can. And so it kind of falls there. And then, of course, the flavor profile and everything has to be there because our business is done if we don't put out a good product. And so people will come and go if the quality is not there. And so we have a big emphasis on that, which is why we have switched to the 100% Black Angus. In the beginning, we kind of pieced together the herd that we could and was available to us. And a lot of people will say once you pop the hide off, it's all the same. And that hasn't been our experience. And so we kind of just drifted to the Black Angus because we can pick our bulls kind of strategically to get the meat quality that we want. And if we want to improve our fat content or our ribeye size and things like that, there are different things that you can look at with the registered bulls that we can try to influence the meat quality there as well.
Tell me a little bit more what you mean when you say a registered bull, because like some people do raise their own bulls and they run them with the cows, but you're selecting a registered bull. Does that mean you've met him? Does it mean he has paperwork? How does that work?
We don't meet them until they get here because there really aren't too many registered Angus herds in the state of Maine. And I think I've maybe seen one that will sell bulls. And so we mostly bring in bulls from kind of all over. But yeah, so the registered farms, they'll put out a catalog and they have all this data on each of the bulls. You know who the parents are, you know who the parents' are, and then they give you kind of this EPD, so the expected progeny data. But so we can pick, like, we want maternal traits, we want a moderate sized calf, we want good growth, and just all sorts of different data that you can use to help pick which bull you think has the potential characteristics to improve your herd, because that's always a big thing. You can make or break a herd with bulls a lot faster than you can your cows, because the bull will put out many more babies than your cow will every year.
Yeah. So I think the takeaway that I've been learning from all three of you today is you got to wear the science hat, right? So we've covered genetics, we've covered physics and thermodynamics with the plate cooler and the registered bulls. Also, botany with choosing the right seeds and plants and all that good stuff. Marketing, a lot of, just all sorts of hats that you all have been wearing. And I think you've hit home a lot of key points. But as we're kind of starting to wrap up, I'd love to get your takes on this question that I like to ask all my uh, interviewees, which is, why does it matter to support local agriculture and farms? And just, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. We'll start with you, Erin.
All right. I guess the biggest thing is just the community aspect. So I think small local farms are just unique in that who they're doing business with, whether the fuel, the repairs, the equipment, the parts, the supplies, everything, just so much of the money that comes to us from selling our beef just recirculates back right into our town through, I mean, all the things that happen, just repairs and feed costs and everything. And so to keep that money here and moving around to benefit more people is just, the community dynamic is strong with shopping with the local farms.
Yeah, thanks for that. Joe, how about you?
Well, I think all of us are going to have pretty much the same answer in a underneath in one ball of wax. But I definitely agree with what Aaron said. But I like the fact that uh, in our situation here, we have a farm store and we have certain field days throughout the year. And when these parents come by with their kids to see what's going on, and these kids, I'm not saying that they've never seen a cow before, or a pig, or a chicken, but it's just great to see it planted in their little developing minds that this is how things happen. This is what a chicken looks like. Whether they're going to be vegan or not down the road, we don't know that. But just the fact of introducing this in a kind of a natural setting, the parents are right there, so nobody gets scared, or nobody freaks out over what a cow looks like, or when a pig snorts. You know, uh, Definitely, I like that aspect of introducing it to the people who might not have a chance of seeing it other than here or at anybody else's farm. Uh, and then, like I say, Aaron made a good point. You infuse $1 in a community, and it can make many more dollars. And you see these people every day. You see them at church. You see them at wherever, at the grocery store, and it just keeps going around the best way we can.
Yeah, well put. Annie, how about you?
Sure. I mean, I recognize the importance of our farms, just not only for our state but in our country, because they're really the backbone of our rural communities. As I think I've mentioned before, it's an integrated part of so many systems that might not just be in one small community, like in my town in Whitefield. That any sort of any impacts, positive or negative, have a ripple effect. And I think, if anything, this pandemic showed us all how important our regional food system is, and the supply chain demand issues, and all of these things that we got a little bit used to having it so easy. I think it really allowed people to recognize that, wait a second, if I can just go to the farm next door or in my community and buy, all of these things, it means that I'm, not just supporting the big grocery store, but I'm supporting my neighbors. I'm supporting my friends, and that money spent makes a big difference in the life of the farmer, in the life of the community, and everybody involved. And the other piece that's, agriculture is a major part of our state's viability and sustainability, in my opinion. And I'm grateful that we have support and that is recognized. And we have things like the Real Maine brand, because it's incredibly valuable because, being at the end of the line, so to speak, in terms of we're at the tip of our country. So it's, if we can think about ourselves as not only as a state where things leave and need to come back in, but what if we thought about it more as a cycle in which we can, as a state, manage our own food supply and food systems. I think we would be much better off focusing there than we are trying to bring food from, California all the way across the country from a, climate change standpoint. It's just the more regional we can think, the better. And that is something that I found a tremendous amount of value in. And I think because I'm in an industry that has had so many farms go out of business, I've seen firsthand what it looks like when we lose farms, and what it looks like for those communities and what it looks like for that land even. One of the reasons people love Maine is because of the way it looks. And a lot of the things they love about it are things that are because of a farm and because we've managed land in an appropriate manner, that we care for the soil, we care for the plants. And when that care is taken away, the wild comes back quickly, and it's not always as pretty as we want it to be. So I think it's incredibly valuable and important that that this sector is valued, for not only us all as farmers, but as a community and as the next generation of eaters, so to speak. So.
Yeah, well, thanks for those thoughts, and thanks to all three of you. It's been so wonderful to hear from all of you, and it's such a pleasure too to get a couple neighboring farmers. It's a good example of that. I would like to tell our listeners that you can certainly connect with all of these farms and any farms, and you can do that on realmaine.com. Also, just check out social media. We have plenty of resources. And thanks everyone for joining us for episode 8 of the Harvesting Maine podcast.